No, stop it! Someone help me! It happened just as I was heading home from work, completely exhausted from overtime, about to step inside my house. Suddenly, someone grabbed me from behind, restraining my movement. Taken aback by the unexpected event, my mouth, which I had opened to call for help, was quickly covered by a large hand. Despite my frantic struggles to escape, I couldn't break free because I was firmly caught. Eventually, I was dragged into a dark, cramped shed set up in the yard. I felt my life was in danger. Please, someone help me.
Stay calm, it's me.
The voice of the person behind me who was holding me down became audible as I struggled to break free. Stopping my resistance at the familiar voice, I cautiously turned around. Through a slight opening in the shed door, the light outside illuminated the face of my brother-in-law. I'm sorry for doing this so suddenly. But there was no other way. It was my brother-in-law who had restrained me. His apologetic expression was dead serious, not at all suggestive of a prank or joke. Seeing me quiet down, my brother-in-law gently removed his hand from my mouth. Why did you do this? It didn't seem like a joke, but I didn't understand the reason. Just as I was about to ask why he had done this, a rattling noise came from outside. My brother-in-law put his index finger to his lips to silence my question and stared in the direction of the noise.
Keep quiet. Are they coming?
Who are they? I remained silent, confused, as I could hear voices talking from the other side of the shed. I had never imagined I would overhear something so horrifying. I am Megan, a 32-year-old office worker living with my husband Kyle. We met at the gym we both attended. I was having trouble figuring out how to use the training machine when he offered to help. That was the beginning. He was considerate, kind, and had a great sense of humor, which made it easy to talk to him. We were attracted to each other quickly, and it didn't take long for us to start dating. Our relationship progressed smoothly. We enjoyed spending time together, and I naturally began to think about a future with him. My husband felt the same way, often hinting at marriage during our relationship. I remember crying with joy when he finally proposed. However, our marriage didn't come easily. My mother-in-law was vehemently opposed not only to our marriage, but even to our relationship. When we tried to visit her, she would repeatedly say, "I can't believe some woman I don't even know is trying to deceive my precious son. I won't approve of this relationship or marriage. Break up with Kyle immediately." She wouldn't even open the door for us when we brought gifts. While this opposition continued for months, various events, such as changing jobs and the death of my parents, drastically altered my situation. As I became more mentally exhausted, my mother-in-law's opposition became increasingly difficult to endure. My husband also seemed disheartened. I think my relationship with him might be over. I thought about giving up. But then my husband, who had been so resolute in rejecting our relationship, rallied and promised, "I will convince her." And he did. As a result, my mother-in-law accepted our marriage. I was astonished and relieved because I had thought our future was dim. We jumped for joy when we heard the news. I was especially grateful that my husband had convinced his mother for the sake of our marriage. Despite this, my mother-in-law and I never met after our marriage. Our wedding consisted only of a photo shoot, and we were told we didn't need to make any formal greetings or contact. I haven't spoken to my mother-in-law since I was thrown out of her house. My husband sometimes visited his parents' home alone, but I always stayed behind. When I asked if I should greet his mother, he would only say, "It's okay." Though he didn't say it, I suspected my mother-in-law still didn't approve of me. To avoid unnecessary conflict, I decided not to reach out to her. One day, we received a call from my mother-in-law. She had injured her leg and was having trouble walking. Unlike previous visits where only my husband was summoned, this time I was also called to their house. Meeting my mother-in-law for the first time in years, I felt a tension in the air. "It's been a while." My voice trembled slightly with nervousness. Although she had a bandage on her right leg, she looked at me with the same sharp eyes as years ago. "Yes, it's been a while. I've heard a lot about you." So, Megan, I know I didn't approve of your relationship with Kyle before, but let's put that behind us. She said with a smile. Put it behind us? It wasn't mutual. She had been the one rejecting me from the start. But I kept silent and listened. If we become a real family, you'll find it easier to live here, right? Don't you think so, Megan? Her tone left no room for disagreement. She was implying that I should take care of her. Having been opposed to our relationship and never seeing her much, I didn't have a good impression of my mother-in-law. Suddenly talking about living together made it hard to agree. When she went to the bathroom, I whispered to my husband, I can't do it. It's one thing to visit, but living with her after all this time is too much. She always opposed our relationship. I can't just start living with her now. I hoped he would refuse on my behalf. But my husband, putting his hands on my shoulders, said, Don't say that. Think about it. This is a chance to mend things between you and Mom. You wouldn't want to have unresolved issues with her, right? Maybe, but if you take care of Mom, she'll come to see you in a better light. She said she wants to put things behind us. It'll be okay. She's not the same as before. I'm always on your side, Megan. Let's give it a try together. Hearing this from my supportive husband made it harder to refuse. Although I didn't have a good impression of her, my husband made sense. If I didn't try to bridge the gap, our relationship would never improve. All right. Since she needs help with walking, we'll move in. Thank you, Megan. That's the spirit. Reluctantly, but trusting my husband, I agreed to live with my mother-in-law. A few days after we moved in, I began to settle into the house. Carrying some unpacked boxes into a room, I was startled to see an unfamiliar man in his late 30s standing at the end of the hallway, looking displeased. I caught my breath in surprise. Who was he? Assuming he was a family member, I straightened up and said, Hi, I'm Megan, Kyle's wife. Nice to meet you. Before I could get an answer, the man merely glanced at me, gave a slight nod, and went into his room. I didn't know who he was. When my husband walked down the hall to clean up, I hurriedly caught him and pointed to the door the man had entered, explaining what had happened. My husband glared at the door. That's my brother. Your brother? I hadn't known he had a brother. He's a useless shut-in. I wish he'd leave already. He's such a nuisance. Isn't it uncomfortable having him around, Megan? Apparently, his brother's name was Samuel. My husband despised him, while my mother-in-law doted on him despite his seclusion. She had told me he was once a prodigy in both academics and sports, but one day, he suddenly became reclusive. She lamented his withdrawal but seemed happy to have him at home. Samuel rarely left his room. And when he did, his expression was always severe, making him seem unapproachable. I felt an uneasy fear towards him. After getting used to living with my in-laws, my mother-in-law's attitude began to change despite her previous promise to let bygones be bygones. Megan, the kitchen is a mess. And the cleaning here is sloppy. Are you really Kyle's wife? Maybe because of her injured leg, she left all the housework to me and started criticizing everything I did. Although she had recovered enough to walk around, she showed no intention of doing any chores. Since I was also working, it was hard to keep up with everything perfectly. Despite my attempts to explain, she refused to listen and continued to demand my attention. I struggled with the increasing burden and confided in my husband that I couldn't meet his mother's standards while working full-time. His response was disappointing. That's your fault, Megan. No wonder Mom is angry. Do a better job next time. He didn't help at all. Though he had promised to support me, he left me alone to deal with his mother while his own workload increased. My husband, who had once shared the household chores, now turned a blind eye. The man who had promised to stand by me now sided with his mother. And it didn't stop there. Why haven't you finished folding the laundry again? You're useless, Megan. Pay up. Now. Pay? Why? as punishment for failing to do your chores and making mom angry. It's only fair, right? And with that, my husband took all my earnings, leaving me with just enough for basic necessities. He and my mother-in-law spent my money freely, while I lived a frugal life. My husband wasn't always like this. I wanted to believe he was temporarily influenced by his mother and would return to his former, kind self. Believing this, I continued to do various chores even after my mother-in-law and husband had gone to bed. I kept up this routine of doing housework late into the night. One day, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, my brother-in-law appeared from the dark hallway. "Oh, Samuel. I'm sorry for making noise so late at night. Did I disturb you?" I was inwardly surprised to see my brother-in-law, who I rarely encountered. I had tried to be as quiet as possible, but even though his room was far away, I worried I had woken him. "No, it's fine. Don't worry about it." That day, I heard my brother-in-law's voice for the first time. He had always been so silent that I wondered if he could speak at all. With a low, calm voice, he told me not to worry, then took a drink from the fridge and went back to his room. I hadn't spoken much with him before, and though he seemed shrouded in a dark, unapproachable aura, he didn't seem as bad as my husband made him out to be. Maybe it was because, unconsciously, I compared him to my nagging mother-in-law and my now unkind husband. Feeling strangely reassured by this normal conversation, I continued with my chores. A few days later, in the morning, I had to leave for work earlier than usual and was busy preparing breakfast. "Megan, could you organize this shelf for me? I want to put in the new magazines I bought. And give it a light cleaning while you're at it. Right now, please." My mother-in-law, holding several magazines, pointed to the bookshelf crammed haphazardly with books and files. It was a shelf she always kept in disarray. Organizing it would take some time. But the clock was indicating it was almost time for me to leave for work. I didn't have any spare time. "I'm sorry, I have to leave for work now. I'll organize the books when I get back." "I don't care about your work. I'm the one who's in trouble here. Organize it now, will you?" When I had no choice but to refuse, my mother-in-law angrily demanded I hurry up. She could organize it herself, but I was the one in a bind for a ridiculous reason. While preparing to leave for work, she continued to complain and make snide remarks. Not wanting to upset her further, I asked my husband, who had more time before he had to leave, to help organize the shelf. But his response was far from agreeable. "That's the job Mom asked you to do, Megan. If you didn't have time, you should have woken up earlier. Don't push your shortcomings onto me." My husband, looking annoyed, blamed me as if he didn't care. My mother-in-law's leg had fully healed a while ago, and my husband still had time before he had to leave. She's his mother, after all. If she needed help, why couldn't he see it and assist her? My mother-in-law pressed me to do it quickly. And my husband blamed me for not waking up early. It was almost time to leave. "I'm really sorry, I promise I'll do it when I get back. I just don't have time now, so excuse me." No matter what they said, I had to go to work, so I ran out of the house, leaving them behind. "Hey, Megan! Are you abandoning your household duties? Wait. What's with that attitude? You're the wife." I could hear my husband and mother-in-law's angry voices until the moment the door closed behind me. Their harsh words echoed in my mind all the way to the office. Already drained from the morning, I focused on work, and after finishing a long day with overtime, I headed home late at night, exhausted. There stood the imposing family house. I wondered how much housework awaited me inside. Opening the front door meant facing more complaints from those two. Dreading going home, I took a moment to organize my thoughts and took a deep breath in the yard. I decided to act as usual when I got home. As I tried to calm myself, "What?" Someone suddenly grabbed me from behind, rendering me immobile. My eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, I was speechless. "No! Let go! Someone!" I managed to cry out for help, but my mouth was quickly covered by a hand from behind. No matter how desperately I struggled to escape, I couldn't break free. I was forcibly dragged backward and shoved into a dark, cramped shed in the yard. The perpetrator was behind me. What should I do? I don't want this, I'll be attacked.
It's me. Calm down.
Hearing the calm, low voice from the person holding me down, I stopped resisting. Cautiously, I turned around and saw my brother-in-law's face illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the slightly open door.
I'm sorry for doing this so suddenly. But there was no other way. I won't do anything more, so please, trust me and calm down.
His face was deadly serious. It didn't seem like a joke or prank. Suppressing my racing heart, I stopped resisting, and my brother-in-law gently removed his hand from my mouth.
Samuel. Why?
I could tell he was serious, but I didn't understand why he did this. Just as I asked him, there was a noise from outside. Coming from the house. My brother-in-law put his finger to his lips to silence me and glared in the direction of the noise.
Be quiet. They're coming.
They? Following his instructions, I stayed silent and listened to the voices coming from the other side of the door. I thought I heard something. Maybe it was just my imagination. She should be back soon, but she's late. Seriously, Megan is such a useless person. Especially at a time like this. When she gets back, we'll tie her up and make her obey. Yes, I'm so tired of having her around. Let's just get it over with. It was my husband and mother-in-law. Tie me up and make me obey. I understood they were talking about me, but what were they planning? Cold sweat ran down my cheek. We'll catch her off guard. She should be distracted since she just got back. I know. We can't afford to be careless. We finally accepted their marriage, after all. Got it? Once she can't resist anymore, we'll. I was horrified by their conversation. They were planning something terrible. My mind was in a panic. If I had gone back into the house as usual, my life might have been in danger. Mom, let's go over the plan inside. It's bad if someone hears us out here. At my husband's suggestion, they went back into the house. Hearing the front door close, my brother-in-law and I quietly slipped out of the shed. My heart was pounding with dread. While relieved that we hadn't been discovered, I was terrified by the horrifying conversation I had overheard. If those two found me, it wouldn't end well. I'm really sorry for having such a mother and brother. It's disgraceful as an older brother to put you in danger, Megan. Samuel apologized in a hushed voice. I hurriedly shook my head. No, it's not your fault, Samuel. In fact, you saved my life. Thank you. But why were they saying those things? I'll explain what I know later. For now, focus on escaping. Once Mom and Kyle are asleep, you need to leave as soon as possible. Even though they had tormented me, I never expected them to take my life. Samuel, his face stern, fell silent, as talking any longer would increase the risk of being caught. He was right. We needed to escape. We exchanged contact information and waited for the lights in the house to go out before sneaking back inside. With Samuel's help, I retrieved my confiscated bank books and packed essential items. We managed to escape the house safely. I rented a vacant hotel room and took the next day off work. Early in the morning, I received messages from my husband and mother-in-law demanding my return, calling me irresponsible for not coming home, but I ignored them. Once I had settled down, I contacted Samuel and briefly explained my situation. He was relieved to hear I had escaped safely. When I asked him to explain what was happening, his tone grew serious. Actually, I overheard Mom and Kyle plotting to take your assets. A crime motivated by money? But my salary was taken by my husband and mother-in-law. That must be a mistake. My salary was being confiscated. It wasn't just about your salary. Didn't you inherit a large sum from your parents? They were after that. Samuel's words made me realize the truth. I had another bank account containing a large inheritance from my deceased parents. They had been targeting that all along. According to Samuel, my husband had noticed the inheritance during our courtship and used it to persuade his initially opposed mother to approve of our marriage. Their plan was to deceive me by pretending to be on my side, then take everything once we were married. My vision darkened. There was no kind husband or understanding mother-in-law. It had all been a facade to get their hands on my inheritance. I'm truly sorry for having such a terrible family. The truth is, my own family's issues made me a recluse. Samuel explained how his mother's excessive interference had ruined his job and marriage prospects. She had called his workplace daily, complaining, and harassed his fiancée until she broke off the engagement. Disheartened by his mother's and brother's actions, Samuel had shut himself in his room.
But this situation has opened my eyes. If I stay with parents who would harm their son's wife, I'll be ruined too. I'm going to follow your example and leave.
Samuel's determined voice sounded brighter. Fortunately, being a former prodigy, he had no trouble finding a job and had a passive income, some of which he had been giving to his mother. He explained that Kyle had been jealous of his talent and their mother's affection. Samuel would bounce back quickly.
I will also sever ties with Kyle and your mother. You do your best too, Samuel.
I needed to resolve things quickly. With resolve in my heart, I ended the call and headed to a lawyer's office for divorce. It was my first step towards leaving them. After spending a few days in the hotel, I found a new place to live and went back to work. Despite constant calls from my husband and mother-in-law, I ignored them. But then, an incident occurred. Frustrated by the lack of contact, they showed up at my office.
That woman stole our precious money and ran off. Megan, you're here, aren't you? Talk to me. Your money is mine, so tell me where to send your paycheck.
They stormed into the office, making absurd demands and causing a scene. They knocked over plants and pounded on walls, demanding I come out. Rather than feeling scared, I was embarrassed by their behavior. Not wanting to leave things as they were, I calmed them down and, with my boss's permission, arranged a meeting in the conference room. To ensure things didn't get out of hand, I asked my supportive boss, who had been there for me when my parents passed away, to join us. Under his watchful eye, I handed the divorce papers to my furious husband and mother-in-law.
Please sign the divorce papers. I'm not going back to you.
I had always kept the completed divorce papers ready for my husband to sign. When I stated my intention firmly, Kyle laughed derisively.
Divorce? That's ridiculous. After you stole our money, I'm not letting you go. Do you think you can escape? I'll straighten you out from scratch.
He banged the table, speaking angrily. But I didn't waver.
The money you took from me wasn't your income, Kyle. And I was given only the bare minimum. Do you think what you did is acceptable? So what? Married couples share their money.
No matter how sternly I spoke, Kyle and his mother acted indifferent, refusing to sign the divorce papers.
I know everything, including your plan to take my money.
Kyle and his mother flinched. They looked as if they wanted to ask how I knew. They clearly remembered their scheme to steal the inheritance.
Sign the papers, or I'll call the police. Which do you prefer? Calling the police is an overreaction. Yes, it is. Megan, you're the one who ran away.
They still tried to make excuses. Annoyed by their stubbornness, my boss sighed deeply.
From what I've heard, your actions are not acceptable. What gives you the right to barge into the company and make such a scene? It's completely out of line. I could have you arrested for trespassing.
Faced with my stern boss threatening to call the police, Kyle and his mother turned pale. Realizing they had no other options, Kyle reluctantly took a pen and signed the divorce papers with a scowl.
Oh, fine. I'll sign it, okay?
My husband grabbed the pen roughly and signed the divorce papers with a messy scrawl. Complaining under his breath, he kicked the chair and stormed out of the room, with his mother hurriedly following. After apologizing to my boss for the trouble caused by my family, he reassured me with a smile, saying I could always count on him. Grateful for his support, I finally felt at ease with the signed divorce papers in hand. It was the start of my new life away from them. I then left the paperwork to the lawyer. Samuel had provided evidence of Kyle's infidelity, revealing that Kyle had frequently visited a hotel with a younger woman under the guise of working late. This explained the increase in his overtime. I felt no sadness since I had lost all love for Kyle. I only hated how he had made me handle all the household chores and take care of his mother while he squandered my money. Still, Kyle was displeased with the demand.
You have no right to demand that from me. You cheated, didn't you? What's wrong with a little cheating? You're so narrow-minded. Withdraw the divorce process now.
He seemed oblivious to his wrongdoing, which made me shudder. With the lawyer's arguments, Kyle reluctantly agreed.
Don't come near me again. It's dangerous.
Hinting at their plan, I said this, and Kyle fell silent, looking like he had swallowed something bitter. It was only fair. I didn't want them to target me again. The lawyer agreed and issued a restraining order against Kyle and his mother. Later, I received a call from Samuel. He had successfully escaped the family house. Taking advantage of his reclusive nature, he had slipped out unnoticed. 2 days after his escape, his frantic mother called me, saying,
"Samuel is gone. You must have persuaded him. It's your fault."
I calmly responded to her frantic yelling.
"I didn't do anything. It's your overbearing behavior that drove him away. Also, you need to respect the restraining order. The lawyer told you not to contact me."
As I spoke firmly, she lost her momentum and fell silent. I hung up and blocked her number. I would never reveal Samuel's whereabouts. She needed to reflect on her actions. A while later, Kyle invited his mistress to live with him, planning to marry her. However, due to his mother's nagging, the woman left him, realizing he had no money. They likely counted on my inheritance and didn't save up. Kyle and his mother continued to live together, unable to lower their lifestyle, wasting money they no longer had. They ended up buying unnecessary things and are now struggling to make ends meet. Without me to handle the household chores, they lived lazily and didn't keep up with the housework. As a result, their home became a garbage dump. Feeling hopeless in their deteriorating living conditions, my husband, in a desperate attempt, apologized and asked to reconcile, saying, "I was wrong. Can we start over?" But I used the restraining order as a shield and immediately rejected him, then blocked his number. I will never forget that they tried to harm me for the sake of my inheritance. Meanwhile, Samuel and I celebrated our newfound freedom.
"Thank you, Megan. Thanks to you, I can start over."
Freed from his mother's grip, Samuel's demeanor had softened. We were comrades who had escaped together. Neither of us would be bound by that house anymore. Samuel and I had taken our first steps toward living our own